Let's do some advanced scouting of the Atlanta Braves' two best hitters, Ronald Acuña Jr. and Austin Riley. Going to be using TruMedia and a couple other outlets to advance scout and kind of dig through how to approach these guys as right-handed pitchers ahead of the 2023 postseason. Let's get it. All right, Braves offense this year has just been historically insane. I'm going to have this Notion document going on the right side of the screen. I'm going to share this in the comments too if you want to follow along. I did some other advanced scouting of other guys in this lineup, but I'm only going to stick to Riley and Acuña for this. They're just such a good team overall. Number one in baseball, WRC+, top average OBP slug here. You know, they're the best team in baseball versus lefties and righties. Versus shapes, you break it out, it's basically top five against almost anything high velocity. Shorter slider, sweepers, four-seam sink, it doesn't really matter. And Ronald Acuña and Austin Riley are two of the pieces of this lineup from the right side of the plate that just dominate for the most part overall. Two quick notes before I get going here. I'm assuming only right-handed pitchers in any of the plots we're looking at and anything else we're doing between Riley and Acuña. And I'm also taking a broader step and approach here that the entire season is what I think will be the most predictive in the 2023 postseason facing these guys, which may not necessarily be true. I'm sure if the team is actually advanced scouting either of these guys, they're digging into maybe specific trends in the last couple months heading into the postseason. But for the simplicity of this video, I'm just going off the entire season. I just think it'll make more sense and it'll be easier to dig into. Acuña specifically, steady all year in terms of production. This is just pulling from Fangraphs and looking at, you know, general WOBA trends, etc. Bit more aggressive. Since mid-August, 50% rolling swing. We could probably show that quickly. I'll just pop to Fangraphs and we'll go to Acuña and we'll take a look. And downtrend of pulling the ball is also another thing I wanted to point out. He's had such a crazy change in how he approaches everything two strikes this year, which is one of the reasons why you see the K rate cutting from 24% down to 11%, which is just bananas that he's able to do that and become that much better of a hitter overall. But WOBA trend here. Yeah, we're seeing that uptrend since he actually started the season slightly slow, you could argue, a bit. Kind of around average, at least. I mean, still an incredible hitter, but then he had a dip down in June and then his tick back up since. But we're looking at that pull differential and that down decreasing throughout the year. He was pulling the ball a lot to start the season, like mid-50s. And you look at the last, say, month or so of games, and he's down below like 35-ish, around 35%. That's definitely kind of seems like he's taking a bit of a conscious oppo approach. Not exactly sure how that would affect scouting and advanced scouting and how to pitch to him overall, but I do find it pretty interesting. Pitch values, he's not below average versus anything, unfortunately. He's elite versus four-seam sink slider, really good versus curveball cutter, and then he's more average versus changeup splitter. And I think that gets at a larger point that I want to make with Acuña, is if you're pitching around Acuña, who has an 11% strikeout rate, relatively low swing miss rate on almost anything, I don't necessarily know if the approach is to try to get a swing and miss versus him, which may be a bit counterintuitive because he's so fast on the bases. I think maybe what I want to take the approach of here as we look through how he's pitched and where he might have any bit of a hole, or not even a hole, but just a way for a pitcher to approach him, is that I kind of almost want to just reduce how hard his contact is and how productive his contact is, just because he doesn't swing and miss anywhere, really, as we're going to see. He's generally pitched down away, which makes sense. Teams are probably just hammering him with slider, which we could see overall. This is just general maps, not looking at specific pitch types here, just to get an idea where he covers and where he's pitched. Covers down in well, covers up away really well. And then, is there any miss? I'm assuming no. Yeah, there's no miss. So this outer dotted line is kind of like your shadow, so a ball outside of the zone. You don't get anything until you go like more than 3 inches outside of the zone. That's a problem from an approach standpoint. And one of the reasons why he doesn't strike out a lot, because you have to sequence to get him to chase outside of the zone, as opposed to just ripping sweepers away, which I guess could be an approach, but then you put him on base, you have a high tendency to steal, you know. So my approach is more thinking about where to pray that you could maybe try to get him out in the zone somewhere. Just general map trend here on the right side. Leak pitches him away heavily, very little in-zone miss. Yeah, we just saw that. What's the approach? Okay. I'm going to reveal kind of what I wrote down. I already ran through this exercise, but let's do it again right here. Acuña, forcing fastball up away. We saw that. He swings more inside. He covers pretty much everything. It's interesting to me that he doesn't cover down away on forcing fastballs. This makes me think of Walker Buehler a bit in terms of how he says that he would take his high vertical ride fastball and put it down in the zone and try to get that rise effect, but not in the nature of staying above barrel at the top of the zone, but more so from starting below the zone, out of hand, having the hitter think ball, and then having that ride back into the zone for a called strike. That's maybe something we'll put in the back of the mind here with Acuña. Very little swing miss, maybe a little swing miss away, but that's more average. So four seam, yeah, again, he's just such a good fastball hitter. There's not much you can do here. Maybe a little bit of hole up in, but there's no room for any error there, especially when there's no miss, right? So your outcome there is, again, just probably weak contact, which you're going to have to end up with on almost anything here. Again, our three columns: pitch frequency, how often a pitch is located in a specific spot; swing rate, how often the hitter's swinging; expected WOB is just a damage statistic that I think is a bit predictive; and then miss rate, again, swing and miss. Acuña's entire swing and miss is just completely worthless, I think, to look at for the most part. Really good versus sinkers, pitch down in with them. I love pitchers coming in off the plate. He swings right on that line too, and he doesn't do damage off that inner third. So again, I don't mind that. You have to pitch him inside. Like, I'm not sure off the top of my head how much he's been hit by pitch, but you kind of, like, guys often get mad at, like, oh, why are you throwing me inside? I'm getting hit. It's like, well, that's the only part of the zone where I'm going to be able to generate weak contact. So I'm probably going to put you on base regardless. So why not try to put you inside? But I like there's really small shred of hope here, right? The swing rate off the plate inside, and then no damage off the plate inside. The other thing, always talk about pitcher miss in the direction of movement. You're throwing sinkers inside, your natural miss tendency there is going to be even more inside, as opposed to a miss maybe if you're trying to go backdoor sink, right? Like, ideally, sure, there's some point maybe you could backdoor sink him, especially down away here. But if you think of the natural pitch movement running into a right-handed hitter, if you're dotting down away sinkers, your natural miss is probably taking you back into the zone where he absolutely mashes things. Whereas I'm more comfortable inner third, where you throw him sink in and it runs off the plate and you just end up walking him as opposed to giving up a home run. So I don't even know if there's swing up and in on four seam. I guess you could kind of say there is. We'll put a question mark there. Sinker in off plate, no damage, some swing. Yeah, I mean, that's your prayer of a hope there, right? Cutters, he's good against, not a lead against. Oh, down away, generally pitch, not surprising. Swing rate is kind of all over the place. A little bit of swing rate down there too, which is interesting. And then now you get into some kind of like, okay, maybe we can limit some of the damage he does against a particular pitch type. And I think, as I'll get into here, the approach is probably some combination of four-seam changeup, which I talk about right there, the four-seam window down away from him, or kind of like a cutter-slider combo. This gets into another video I did where I talked about one of the best sequences at creating swing miss is a cutter to a slider, or even like a gyro slider to a bigger slider, which we've seen some teams kind of opt into and throw with pitchers. The name that always comes to mind for me is Clay Holmes, the reliever for the Yankees. But that combination here, I could maybe see some shred of hope with Acuña. Cutters down away, you're looking at damage, right? We're looking at more average damage, but relative to anywhere else kind of in the zone for Ronald Acuña, there's maybe a bit of hope that you could put cutter down away, especially, again, thinking about natural miss being then off the plate, and then sequence off that a larger slider, like your sweeper down here. This slider is going to be anything that's more probably tighter gyro. Sweeper is going to be anything that Statcast is charting as a sweeper, right? Swinging down off the plate there, I like that, right? Decent amount of swing, fooled on sweepers down away. He does kill them if their arm side misses, but again, thinking direction of pitch movement, we're expecting those to be more off the plate. And then the most promising thing is that you have a little bit of swing miss just in the shadow of the zone, where pretty much all of their pitch types don't really succeed in generating swing miss. So the sequences, I think, that are key here. We'll go sequences. And again, we're not talking about a specific pitcher here. We're just talking about general pitch types. But cutter down away to sweeper specifically, we'll go non-gyro, because again, gyro here, he covers really well all across the zone and even down. So you need to have some lateral break going away from him for it to work. Sweeper, non-gyro. That combination, I think, could work. Like, tunnel those pitches down off the outer third of the plate. There's still a really good chance he hits one of them, or you walk him, again, especially really disciplined hitter. But this is like the only part right here, these sweepers down away is the only thing that I think plays in the natural pitch movement, gets him around a shadow of the zone or larger, and is able to get him to swing and miss. In concert with that, if you're not a cutter sweeper guy, right, you're not a heavy supinator, if you're more of a pronator and you throw some four-seam ride in changeups, it's a more risky approach, but you could take this four-seam we were talking about earlier, this down away interesting area. You can maybe try to set up changeups off that, right? But again, the reason I say it's riskier is thinking of the natural pitch movement. Your miss is probably back into the zone where he's going to take you deep. So I would use the four seam sparingly, and then what I would do is maybe try to play around with changeup. And this gets into a larger point. I don't think Acuña sees a ton of changeups generally. Right changeups as a whole, I don't think are used a lot. They're pretty taboo, which makes sense. You know, most guys probably are going to opt for some kind of sweeper versus a hitter. But in doing some of this advanced scouting, looking at really good hitters like Acuña, and Mookie Betts is another one that pops to mind, not as productive versus right changeups as they are against anything else in the repertoire. I'm not necessarily sure if that's just a product of never seeing it, or if there's something else to it, but with changeups, pitch down, swinging in the zone down, and then you have more sporadic damage here, where you have a little bit of down in that doesn't really work. It doesn't create damage for Acuña. Down doesn't create a ton of damage. He does have some down in damage there, but you have a larger window here. If you just say like bottom half in, if you take like this area, bottom half and in, and go, okay, I'm gonna try to put my changeups down there against him, I may have actually a shot at getting a swing and miss, the rare in-zone swing and miss for Ronald Acuña, right? Down, in. And ability to limit some contact, because if you look at his production versus changeups here, we're just looking across here, right? Again, I'm not assuming I'm gonna be able to strike him out. If you're gonna strike him out, use a splitter, but so few guys have splitters that we're not gonna live in that world, so to speak. But changeups, from like a pure ex-Woba standpoint, relative to everything else that he faces, even sweepers at 416, we're looking at ex-Woba, it's the only thing below 400. So again, I get in a lot of instances the slider might be a better option against Ronald Acuña, especially going sweeper away to protect that pitch. But if you're just trying to get him to have some kind of weak contact, the sweeper could work, but the other option is just some kind of changeup. This becomes interesting to me from a Dodgers standpoint. If they get them in the NLCS, and you think about some of those Dodgers righties, like Gavin Stone, Emmett Sheehan, and others, who have changeups, and maybe you'd be more willing to face Ronald Acuña and throw right changeups with that approach, as opposed to thinking that you could get four seams by top of the zone or anything along those lines. So I like the idea of going like four seam down. Again, super risky on that. I'm not entirely sure if that's even a smart approach overall. But changeup down in, I think, is one that could work. And maybe you could kind of play, if you're a sinker change guy, you could kind of, again, talk about in off the plate sinker to changeup down. Again, he covers sinker so well there, it's tough. But again, if you could set that axis on the middle and run it off the inner third of the plate, I think that could work overall. So crazy, I know you're talking to me and I'm trying to tell you how to pitch Ronald Acuña. It's probably not going to work overall. He's such a good hitter, but that's my idea based on anything I see. It's just cutter sweeper down away, or play with some four seam down to get take, and then changeups down in or sinkers in. Changeups down, we'll go sinker in, and we'll go in because you got to get it inside because he's going to kill it on the inner third of the plate regardless. So that's what I'm going with, right? Maybe the league needs more right changeups, which I don't know if everyone in the world agrees with, but we can think about it and have some fun. I know I tweeted about this recently, and the reaction was actually kind of interesting. I know it actually floated around some front offices from some people who texted me. The debate of right changeups always gets thrown out and rejuvenated, on a yearly basis. So I was glad to be the one to initiate that and catalyze that discussion once again. Let's jump to Austin Riley now. Same idea using TruMedia. General plots, pitched kind of middle down away. Where's he slug? Covers out at third really well, covers down in really well. Similar pattern. He's a right-handed hitter. I'm not surprised. This looks kind of similar to Acuña's. I wonder if we could just pull that up and compare really quick. Slug. Let's see. Acuña slug. Yeah, so up away there. And again, the key thing here for, I think, the differential between Acuña and Riley, watch the top of the zone. You start to get some in-zone non-slug from Riley. Just doesn't cover the upper third as well. He's just not as good of a hitter as Acuña, but he's still an elite hitter. But Ronald Acuña is like the best hitter in baseball by, I think, a decent margin. So anyway, slugs there, and where's the miss? I'm guessing down and away, as many righties are. Yeah, then you get this, right? Some up-away miss, which we definitely didn't see with Ronald Acuña. If we could toggle back to his miss chart, generally, right? There's no swing and miss in zone here at all. Like, away, maybe, but, like, that's average swing miss. Like, above average swing miss, where do you actually miss pitches consistently? Yeah, top of the zone, Austin Riley is going to be an approach we're going to talk about here. So, trends for him, I don't think I saw anything. Peak steady early August all year. Hard contact trended up until early August, above average since. Rolling four seam from mid-June until now is down. So the league isn't throwing him as much four seam, and he's progressively pulling the ball less throughout the season. Again, similar to Ronald Acuña. I don't know if that's a Braves thing generally, but maybe trusting natural bat speed and pushing the ball away is a bit more of an approach that they're taking. Above average versus pretty much everything, and he's kind of more average versus slider. So we're probably going to see a more traditional approach from a guy like Austin Riley here in terms of how to pitch to him. Let's see what I wrote down and walk through it. Really good coverage of four seam in zone, some miss up. Cool, let's look at four seam. Up away, swings kind of more inside, covers really nicely, top of the zone there. That lateral portion is solid. And then miss rate. Okay, this is an interesting one. So sometimes what you'll see is like, I always like looking swing rate relative to expected WOBA. Are you swinging somewhere where you're not creating damage, right? In these plots, generally the swing rate here on four seam for Riley and the damage one for Riley look relatively similar. They're both kind of asymmetric blobs, but they overlap. Like if you were to copy those and put them over each other, it wouldn't be too much differential. The thing is though, you run into like up away here with the miss, and then what you run into is like, okay, he doesn't swing a lot on that upper outer third of the portion of the zone, but he does create damage and he swings and misses. So I consider that more of like a high variance approach if you're going to go four seam against him. It's like you could try to put him up away, but your outcomes there are wide. The curve of outcomes you could end up with are wider. It could either result in a lot of damage or it could result in swing and miss. And the other concern here, again, four seam, arm side miss up. You're running back into where maybe he swings a little less. So if you're targeting this outer third and your miss pulls this way, you're pulling into a spot where that damage to miss equation doesn't balance out as nicely, where it's distributed for one outcome or the other. So again, yeah, he's got really good four seam coverage of the zone. Zone misses, some miss up, as that says, but risky. So he's like high variance. I think that's just a high variance approach for him. Sinkers is the one pitch he's kind of more average against. Let's take a look at that. Pitch down in, swings way off the plate inside. There you go. And then you got some expected WOBA up here, where you see a lot of swing, but you don't see a lot of damage. So he's susceptible to the sinker inside. Really miss there at all, which is important to think about. Again, from the standpoint of like, okay, if you don't think you're going to strike Austin Riley out, or if you're striking Austin Riley out, it's probably on slider down away. To some extent with Acuña, we were just like, let's limit contact. With Riley, there's probably more of a tendency to get slider out down away with him. Get slider outs down away against him. But there's also a little room for sinker, kind of inside up. So middle up. Yeah, tons of swing and a miss off inside. Tons of swing, not swing and a miss. He does, again, we're looking at that here. He swings here, doesn't create damage. Minimal damage when up. I'd even say middle to some extent. So yeah, that's similar to Acuña, right? Riley off inside the plate, pushing him that way, I think could work from an approach standpoint. And then we see a similar, no, not a similar thing. We'll talk Cutter quick. Cutter's pitched away. Doesn't actually swing much down away on cutters, which is interesting. Kind of swings more on arm side misses and covers. So I like that pattern just from a hitter's standpoint. He's pitched down there. He doesn't swing much down there. He's willing to kind of take that pitch, it seems. And he's kind of just waiting for the arm side misses that come back over the zone. So I like that. There's probably not much to do there against Cutter. His pitch value against Cutter is solid too. He's well above average there. Sliders, again, the only part you're probably going to get him to swing and miss. Pitched again down away. This is non-sweeper and this is sweeper right here. Thinking more gyro, more bullet, less sweep on these sliders right here. Down away, swings kind of middle. And again, you have the nicer portion here. A lot of right-handed hitters, this outer third of the zone, just don't create a lot of damage. But again, any arm side miss, yeah, he's going to crush it. And then you have a little in-zone swing miss here too, especially down, which I like. So we were talking about up here how we had like the four seam, right? He was creating damage up away and he was swinging, missing up away. You see a little more like how these fit like puzzle pieces between this expected WOBA chart and this swing and miss chart, where you see that little like almost peak right here, how this miss could almost fit beautifully inside of this expected WOBA, which is nice. There's not overlap there. So the margin for error might be small, but I wouldn't say it's as high variance. It's just a matter of getting that slider down, especially gyro. You can use more gyro against him than you can against a guy like Acuña who hit those well. And then same thing, sweepers away, right? A lot of in-zone miss up, even up away. So I don't mind if that pitch kind of rides up and carries out more of those rise sweepers, so to speak. No damage out of third versus sweepers. So you got to pound this guy with sliders for sure. Winner for sliders, 6 down away. And you could say either gyro, so non-sweep, or sweep work against him. Which makes sense. He's more of an average guy overall versus sliders. He's susceptible to them. Curveballs covering decently well. Changeups, not as much as Acuña, right? He's got a little more of that slug in the map here inside. Doesn't swing as much in zone either. So he's a little better versus changeups than Acuña, in my opinion. So again, you can't probably have a guy you could maybe have a mixed guy who's got four-seam sink, sweeper, slider, changeup, and match up guys like Acuña and Riley really differently. But you're probably one of the better pitchers in baseball if you have all four of those. And if you have all 4 or 5 of those pitches, you're probably not as confident in throwing each of them maybe at the same rate, unless you're like a veteran pitcher who's really, really good, like a Scherzer or something like that, along those lines. But I do think the approaches between Acuña and Riley, despite being right-handed hitters, are similar. I would prioritize more changeups against Acuña. And I think, and again, we're going kind of cutter slider down away against Acuña, or that forcing take into the zone would change up off that down end. Whereas Riley is more, I think you could just let him eat with sliders, particularly non-sweeper sliders. I think is maybe one of the larger differentials between Acuña and Riley. That's a pretty big difference there. Velo, yeah, again, covers Velo really well. Swing and miss the top of zone. That's very similar to the fastball map we were looking at. I think Acuña is similar against Velo too, right? Yeah, just crushes Velo. Yeah, that's unbelievable. It doesn't even matter if you're throwing hard against Acuña. Just throw changeups, as I'm pointing out here, even though people don't really love right changeups. But yeah, that's it. Acuña Riley tried to keep this one a little shorter than my Orioles one, which I think I linked to earlier and is also on my feed if you want to check that out, where I dig through each of those guys. That's up around 45 minutes or so. This one, try to keep it a little tighter. Just Riley and Acuña. Hope you enjoyed. Any comments, thoughts, or how you'd approach either of these guys, or anything you kind of disagree with in my thoughts? Always interested in hearing from that in the comments. Thanks for watching.